Hi, I'm Dr. Christina Parks, and this is how to clear spike protein from your body. It's becoming more and more evident that whether you just had COVID or whether you had the jab, that spike protein is accumulating in our tissues and especially in our brain, and it doesn't seem to be draining. So Dr. Robin Rose has done a ton of work on this, and she's going to present some of it she has already presented some of it, but right now, I'm just going to talk about part of the story in the interest of time. And we're going to talk about how to get it out of the body. So the accumulation of the spike protein in the brain is of huge interest. And I could probably show you about 40 slides, but we're going to try to stick to just a few. So what I want to really go over tonight is what are the challenges to getting spike protein out of the body, and what are the key elements that any protocol that is seeking to get the spike protein out of the body needs to have to be effective. This is going to be geared more towards people who are either mildly or moderately injured, or just know that from having COVID several times, they probably have some spike protein in their body. And so I want normal people to have something that they can do that has good scientific rationale. But this can also be sort of ramped up for those who are moderately or severely injured, with the difference being that those people really, really need to be under practitioner's care, because this is really no joke. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining me. Okay. Clearing spike protein to the body. What are the key elements of a spike detox protocol? So first, why do we need this? Let's go over that. Okay. So the spike protein is accumulating in the brain. And so here's a paper that was recently published, SARS-CoV-2 spike protein accumulation in the skull meninges brain axis, potential implications for long-term neurological complications in post-COVID-19. All right, so it says, in this study, we utilized mouse models and human post-mortem tissues to investigate the presence and distribution of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein in the skull meninges brain axis. Our results revealed that the accumulation of the spike protein in the skull marrow, brain meninges, and spine parenchyma, the injection of the spine protein alone caused cell death in the brain, highlighting a direct effect on brain tissue. Furthermore, we observed the presence of spike protein in the skull of deceased long after their COVID-19 infection, suggesting that the spike's persistence may contribute to long-term neurological symptoms. So we're going to go through a few of the figures of this paper that are really concerning, because what they found was it didn't matter. You didn't have to be injected with the COVID vaccine in order for spike protein to actually accumulate in your brain and to stay there for a very long time. What scientists have found since is that usually if a cell is like mutated or it's having problems or it's aberrant, then if that happens, then the body tells it to commit suicide. But that is not happening here. These cells with the spike protein become these zombie cells that don't want to die, and they just keep making more and more spike protein and then throwing out all sorts of inflammatory cytokines. And so they are not dying or undergoing autophagy like they should. They are resistant to that. And so that's why certain measures need to be taken. Okay, so here in this first mouse, this mouse was exposed to the spike protein from infection. And so what you can see here, this red is the spike protein. So just from infection, this mouse has residual spike protein in his liver, in his lungs, and in some intestinal areas. So here it says, we detected spike S1 binding in most organs, including the heart, lung, liver, kidney, intestine, thymus, spleen, and pancreas. In contrast to the wild type spike 1 and one that was from the flu virus, basically, so that's what they found with it from actually getting infected. However, when they just took some spike and injected it into the tail, and so this would be more along the lines of your body producing spike and it getting into the bloodstream, you can see in this second one where it says spike S1, it went everywhere. So once the system starts making it, the spike protein itself is going to go everywhere. Now, I don't have a slide to show this, but what they have found is that there are at least 13 different receptors that allow the spike protein to get into cells. So the spike protein isn't wandering around in your blood. As soon as it's in your blood, it's taken up by cells, and it's taken up by almost all of the cells in your body. All right. And so this was, an influenza protein, just showing that it co-localizes in similar areas to the wild type protein as well. All right. Then what they did is they actually took sections of the brain. And here, right here, you can't really see too much spike in the brain. But when they looked closer, they did find it. But here's one that would be more analogous to vaccination. And they did see this red staining of the spike in the brain as comparison to influenza protein, not much. So this was clearly in a rat. All right, so what they did next is they investigated for the presence of spike protein in the skulls of 34 patients who died from non-COVID related causes. So these are people that just died. And the question is, well, if they had COVID, do they have spike in their brain? And so they died during the of non-COVID related causes during the pandemic in 2021 and 2022. It says we indeed identified the spike protein in 10 of them. 213 proteins were identified to be dysregulated in the brain cortex after spike 1 injection, with 190 being upregulated and 23 being downregulated. So that's just showing you how toxic the spike protein is. When it's in there, it's really changing gene expression, and it's really doing a lot of damage in the brain. So here is their positive control. And what you're looking for is not the white, it's this kind of purplish red color that's sort of diffuse without. And so this is a positive control, all right? And then number 2, these were just different people that they were looking for. Number 2 was, I don't know if it was a negative control, but here, number 3, and you can see the purple here. So this person has spike protein in their brain. This person right here, the little purplish, has spike protein. This is a negative control. We're not seeing any spike protein. This person is having a little bit of spike protein here. Here you can see the purple spike protein. Here you can see some of the purple spike protein. And a couple of these were controls with no spike protein. So basically what this is basically showing is that just from having COVID, people were accumulating spike protein in their brain, and it is not coming out. It was there, months to a year later. All right. And then what they also, scientists have found, and this is compliments of Robin Rose, who you can see here, this is from her presentation, that the spike protein, when it touches cells, is causing them to fuse together. So only certain cells are supposed to fuse, and they're only supposed to fuse under certain very, very specific conditions. But in reaction to the spike protein, different cells are just fusing together, and they're forming these large conglomerations in which, especially if the person was vaccinated, they're then making a lot of spike protein. And so they're making spike protein, and they just are in these huge conglomerations where they're throwing out all these inflammatory cytokines that are causing all sorts of problems, mostly huge amounts of inflammation. And those, they're called syncytia, these fused cell globs aren't dying. They're not going away. They're just staying there, producing all sorts of inflammatory cytokines. So this is really a problem. If you do get them to die by giving something that causes cell death at a high level, then they blow up and they release the spike protein all over, and it just goes right into other cells and causes them to fuse and create a new zombie cell. So you really haven't gotten ahead of yourself. So you have to have something to prevent it from going into the other cells. All right, so where is this spike coming from? Well, we know if you got injected with the vaccine, your cells are making it. But if you had just COVID, how did it get in your brain? So what scientists and researchers are finding is that many of us who've had COVID, and even if we got better, and even if we didn't have very severe COVID, actually end up with a subclinical COVID gut infection. So we can have it while we have COVID, but it can persist if it's not treated afterwards. And so they found that there were a lot of people who had mild symptoms of COVID, but actually ended up with brain fog, leaky joints, like kind of a rheumatoid arthritis like thing, all kinds of swollen lymph nodes, all of these sort of, and then some people thought they were fine, but when they took their markers, they found that their body was in a very high state of inflammation. And that's because the SARS-CoV-2 virus can actually infect your gut cells and your good gut bacteria, and it can actually kill off your good gut bacteria. So it's actually infecting your gut bacteria and creating spike protein, which is then can be released into the gut. And in the meantime, it's killing your good gut bacteria. So this is causing a hugely dysregulated microbiome, which in itself is inflammatory, and a very, very inflamed gut. These little cells, this is like the lining of your intestine, these little cells, these little finger cells, they look like toes here, are called villi. And so they've also found that these cells are infected with SARS-CoV-2 and or with the vaccine, and they are also expressing spike protein. Now, here's the thing, the spike protein itself, there are tight junctions in between your cells that prevent stuff from going from your gut into your blood. However, the spike protein causes those to disintegrate, and so that the spike protein leaks through them, this is called leaky gut, into your blood, where it can go to your organs and it can cause systemic inflammation. But it's also, once it's in your bloodstream, you have cells lining your blood vessels, and it starts infecting those cells or getting into those cells, where it actually causes those epithelial cells of your blood vessels to make weird proteins. And that's where we're seeing, and to do all of this weird clotting, where we're seeing all of this weird clotting. And so that's because it's, you know, the first cells it's going to see are these cells that are lining the blood vessel. And so part of the reasons that we're forming these clots is whether, and we're seeing this in some people, not as severe, who just had COVID. These gut cells, these epithelial cells of the blood vessels become very inflamed because they have spike protein, or if the vaccine, if they actually got the genetic material, they're making spike protein. Once they have spike protein in them, they start becoming very aberrant and sending weird signals, which causes all kinds of weird blood clotting. I'm not going to get deeply into the blood clotting, because the point would be, if we can stop this spike from circulating through the body and stop it from going from the gut into everywhere else, then a lot of these downstream problems like the clotting and other problems are not going to be an issue. Now, some damage may have already been done, like myocarditis, but some of it may be that in those heart cells, again, if we can kill the aberrant ones without that spike protein coming out and getting into other cells, then some of those issues may be resolved. But I'm going to probably bring in practitioners such as Dr. Peter McCullough to talk specifically about specific issues like myocarditis. We're not going to talk about that much tonight. Okay, there's one other thing that I really want to talk about. So most people have just been talking about the spike protein going from the gut through the leaky gut into the blood. But there is another pathway for it to get all over the body, including to the brain. And that's in this sort of new organ. Of course, we've always had it, but they're just like giving it credence, called the interstitium. What the interstitium is, it's these membranes that are around all of your organs and around your gut. And what happens is it's a fluid-filled space. And so stuff gets into it and it travels to different areas, because communication in the body is essential for proper function. So if this is functioning right, it's sending good things where it needs to be. However, and so I'm just going to read this for those who maybe aren't going to. The interstitium is a fluid-filled spaces in tissue that are connected throughout the body. They should be considered a new organ, and that these spaces may play a major part in a lot of what goes on in your body. This highway of interconnected spaces filled with moving fluid, the interstitium, may also explain how cancer spreads. The study says that newfound network is where lymph comes from. Lymph is a fluid that your immune cells need to work well. So this interstitium, nutrients from it can go to your gut, but viruses can also get in it and go to other areas. bacteria can get in it and go to other areas of the body. Cancer cells can go in it and metastasize and go to other areas of the body. So when it's functioning properly, those things shouldn't necessarily happen. Immune cells should prevent it. I'm sure as they study it, they're going to find that the interstitium has a wide variety of ways of protecting itself. But in the case of this chronic gut infection, I think what's happening is, like, let's say that this is the mucosa of the gut. What's happening is the spike protein is going through that into the interstitium, and it's flowing through these and actually going up into like the brain, into other organs, all over the place, and it's not being prevented. And this may be the case for other things, like when you have any kind of viral infection, but this one with the spike protein is just very, very deleterious. And so I think that this interstitium is something we're going to hear a lot more about, and I think it's playing a huge role here, and some other things, and so it needs to be protected. We're going to hear more about that. Okay, so what does any protocol to help the body clear the spike protein need to have, and why? The first thing is open your detox pathways. I don't hear a lot of people saying anything about this, but if you are dumping spike protein out because you're killing these, zombie cells, it's got to have somewhere to go. And if you're not pooping, you're not detoxing your body. If you're not sweating, you're not detoxing your body. And so we're going to talk a little bit about opening detox pathways. And I just want to stress that we'll probably bring in Dr. Pete Ross, who is an expert on this. And I just want to stress how important that is, because I see a lot of sort of detox protocols being bandied about with not talking about how important it is when you start detoxing to make sure that those toxins and things have somewhere to go. The next step is to address potential subclinical SARS-CoV-2 infection, which we just said. It's infecting the gut cells, it's infecting the gut bacteria, it's making spike protein. And then if you kill, like, let's say you give an antibiotic, if you kill those bacteria or the gut cells that have the spike protein, it releases it and it becomes hugely, hugely inflammatory and causes mast cell activation, allergic reaction, and enormous amounts of inflammation. So anything that's going to cause the death of cells that harbor the spike protein, you've got to neutralize that spike protein so that it doesn't go into other cells, so that it doesn't cause hyperinflammation, and so that it doesn't cause mast cell activation, which is a kind of hugely allergic-like reaction. So the next thing, that obviously the spike protein is hugely inflammatory, so we want to reduce inflammation. The next thing is the virus, and especially the lipid nanoparticles of the vaccine, go to fatty tissues. So those lipid nanoparticles are going to go to the ovaries, they're going to go to the bone marrow, they're going to go to the brain, they're going to go to the fat on the heart, and they're going to go to your adrenals, because your adrenals are very fatty. And not only that, but just the fact of being infected or getting the vaccine is extremely, extremely stressful on the body, and your adrenals respond to stress. And so many people's adrenals are not functioning right, either due to the vaccine or due to post-COVID syndrome, and they have dysautonomia, where their sort of automatic nervous system isn't working right. And they have something called POTS, where when they stand up, their blood pressure isn't regulating, and they can't even stand up without falling over or without passing out. And so a lot of that has to do with the adrenals not functioning the way they should in conjunction with the brain. And so adrenal support is really, I think, a very necessary part of any spike detox. We also have to restore proper mitochondrial function. So if you don't remember from high school, the mighty mitochondria powerhouse of the cell, this is making your energy. And the spike protein destroys mitochondria. It binds to some of the key proteins in the mitochondria, and it just destroys it. That's part of the reason when you had a COVID infection or when you had the vaccine, that you just had no energy, because it's really destroying your mitochondria. And so you can't heal without energy. The other thing that the mitochondria plays a critical role in is deciding whether a cell should commit suicide when it's gone rogue. And so cells with the spike protein, or that their mitochondria have been destroyed, they need to commit suicide and let healthier cells take over. But by destroying or affecting the mitochondria, the spike protein has really screwed up the signaling pathways that compel the cell to commit suicide when it needs to. That's one of the reasons we're getting these zombie proteins. So any protocol for removing the spike protein and restoring your health needs to restore proper mitochondrial function so that those aberrant cells can die and so that you can have the energy that your body needs to carry out these functions. Okay, so next, and here's another one of the huge hurdles, challenges. Apparently, these zombie cells that have spike protein that are throwing out inflammatory cytokines, they don't want to die, and they don't undergo normal, they don't respond to the normal signals to commit suicide. Your body says, hey, you're rogue. It's time for you to take one for the team. And they're like, I'm not listening to you. And so it takes a lot to induce autophagy, which means the signal to commit suicide in these aggregated syncytia that are these zombie cells that have gone rogue. And so that's very important to figure out how to do that. The next one is once you've figured out how to get those cells to commit suicide, they dump spike protein all over the place, which just goes into the next cells, causes them to aggregate and form these syncytia and become the next line of zombie cells. It's kind of like a bad movie. So you've got to prevent that liberated spike protein from entering other cells also because it's going to be hugely inflammatory. And so I think this is some of the problems that people who have been vaccine injured have experienced. They've undergo a treatment and maybe it induces autophagy and their body starts dumping the spike protein and then it causes a massive inflammation response or massive mast cell activation responses, which is like a huge allergic response. And so we want that not to happen. So how can we prevent that spike protein from entering other cells? We've got to bind it with other things or make sure those cells aren't responding to it. And then, of course, as we're dumping it, we want to either break it down or get it out of the body through the gut or just protein degradation. Okay, so I'm briefly going to discuss opening detox pathways. So we need to restore normal bowel function. And again, we will bring someone in specifically to have a whole session on this, but I'm just going to touch on these briefly. So we need to restore normal bowel function. You've got to be going poop to get stuff out. So that includes incorporating more soluble fiber into the diet, supporting a healthy microbiome through probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics. Be talking more about that. We need to support bile production because that is really important for making healthy poop, and liver function because liver makes bile. So beets are a natural source that supports the liver. And of course, we all know that there are many herbs and foods that support healthy bile production. Again, that's a whole nother seminar. Get your lymph moving. So there are easy ways to do that by walking, by bouncing, Pilates, yoga, dry brushing, right? So we want to get that lymph moving, especially because the spike protein, your immune cells might kill cells with spike protein or whatever. We want that to be moving and to be clearing and the lymph to be dumping into, where it needs to go to, into the intestinal system to get that stuff out of the body. And then some of it's going to be going through the kidneys. And so we want to optimize kidney function and make sure that the kidneys are not hyperinflamed, that they have enough water and proper electrolyte balance. So I just don't want to minimize these things because if we try to do all these other things without addressing this, we're setting ourselves up for failure. All right, so this is one of the biggest hurdles in developing a competent protocol, and that is addressing not only the potential subclinical SARS-CoV-2 infection in the gut, which I think a lot more people have had or have than they realize, but the fact that the spike is in the gut because of that. And remember, this paper says, could SARS-CoV-2 have bacteriophage behavior or induce the activity of other bacteriophages? And so what is happening, bacteriophages is a virus that infects a bacteria, and that's what's happening. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is infecting bacteria in our gut, and it's also infecting our gut cells. The Pfizer vaccine is actually contaminated in a way such that it could actually increase the chances of your gut bacteria being infected with DNA that can actually make the spike protein. So that's a whole complicated story. But what we are finding over and over again, clinicians that are working in this, is they're finding spike in the gut. It destroys the microbiome, specifically our bifidobacteria, which are really correlated with positive health outcomes, and it's destroying them. It causes huge amounts of inflammation. It causes leaky gut. It's entering the blood. It's entering the interstitium. It's causing mast cell activation, which is this huge allergic reaction. And so people who have spike in the gut are developing all sorts of food allergies or sensitivities that they may not have had. And just anything can trip them off. Because the spike is so toxic, and like I said, it's toxic to the mitochondria, it is actually has many mechanisms by which it is contributing to tumor formation. So if you have chronic spike in the gut, at some point that inflammation and the aberrant pathways that it's activating is going to lead to tumor formation. And so this is why I think everyone needs to do something to make sure that they're not having continual residual spike in their gut. And then spike can be packaged in endosomes and little vesicles and go to other parts of the body, including the brain. Okay, so how to address potential subclinical gut infection? A really easy way is obviously ivermectin. I just want to point out here, many of the things that we're going to do further on in this seminar are going to talk about quercetin. Make sure you don't use quercetin and ivermectin at the same time. I would suggest, if you want to address a subclinical gut infection, to use ivermectin for 7 to 10 days before you start using other things, or you can use it with a binder as well. All right, so ivermectin will prevent the spike protein from going to those other cells generally, and it will also sort of neutralize a SARS-CoV-2 infection. And so it can be good for getting rid of a subclinical gut infection, but there still may be these zombie cells in the gut, in other areas of the body, and in the brain that are harboring this spike protein that we have to deal with, okay? So Sabine Hazan showed that ivermectin, with the use of vitamin C, D, and zinc, had a wonderful effect on restoring the microbiome and restoring the bifidobacteria. All right, so that is one thing that you can do all of these at the same time. However, if these are infecting your bacteria, it may be necessary to use antibiotics to kill these bacteria that are harboring the spike protein, that are infected with the virus, right? And so some practitioners are using both amoxicillin and augmentin. I know that Dr. Robin Rose said she's just using amoxicillin because she has enough other antibacterials in the things that she's using. However, if you do this, you're going to liberate huge amounts of spike protein, cause huge amounts of inflammation and mast cell activation. So you've got to have something, even if you're doing all this, you've got to have something that binds the spike protein in the gut, not that just kills the infection. And this has been the huge hurdle that many of us have been like, well, how do we do that, right? Because again, that you could treat someone, you could induce the death of these cells that are harboring the spike protein and cause a huge inflammatory response. All right, the higher your load of spike protein, the more that's going to be a problem. If you're just someone who seems like your health is, relatively good, then it's probably not a huge problem for you. But if you're extremely vaccine injured, then it could be a huge problem with you. Or if you're having an enormous, enormously troubling post-COVID symptoms, it could be a problem for you. So I just want to touch on ivermectin, which you've probably heard about quite a bit. It prevents viral replication, reduces inflammation, prevents spike protein binding, modulates purinergic signaling, and activates T cells. And over here, this is showing how ivermectin actually sensitized. This was a tumor in someone, and I believe that many of these tumors and these turbo cancers are being caused by many of these tumors are actually being caused by the aberrant signaling of the spike protein. And so this was a tumor. And then when they added ivermectin, what these little blue and green cells are, these are immune cells that are actually now eating this tumor up. And so ivermectin actually sensitizes tumors to the immune system. So it allows the body to attack and destroy the tumors. So there's a lot of really positive things that ivermectin does. However, it's not really inducing autophagy to kill the cells. And then it's not doing enough to prevent the spike protein that might be liberated during autophagy that's induced by other things from going to other cells. However, it can play a very positive role, obviously, in a spike detox protocol. Okay, so how to neutralize the spike protein in the gut and address mast cell activation in the gut, which is like this horrible inflammatory allergic-like response. We need to use binders to bind the spike and the virus. So there are many different options here, and there are practitioners using all of these to one degree or another. So my goal is to give you options. So I'm giving you this protocol. If somebody else comes with a protocol that I think has a lot of merit, if it doesn't have a lot of merit, they may not hear back from me, but if it has a lot of merit, I'm going to bring them on, because my goal is to give you options, but I'm also going to tell you my scientific opinion about what those best options are, which could, of course, change over time as I learn more information. So one is to use activated charcoal. The problem with that is you can't really use it all the time because it depletes minerals. I actually used it because I thought I was giving myself food poisoning one day, and 2 days later, like, my arm was buzzing because I had an electrolyte imbalance. I thought I was implanted with like some sort of chip and aliens were contacting me. But my ex-husband was like, well, didn't you just take that activated charcoal? Maybe your minerals were off. I was like, oh. So I took some minerals and I was fine within like half an hour. So, I mean, I guess my sci-fi novel isn't going to happen, but that's okay. I wasn't really that happy with my arm buzzing in a weird way. So another option is humic acid. For many people, there are many different sources of humic acid. So you need to make sure that you have one that's very well sourced and is standardized, so you know what is happening. Now, I think humic acid helps because it has these polysaccharides in it. I'm going to talk more about that bind, but fulvic acid, which is the soluble component, does not seem to help as much. And I'm going to have to ask Robin Rose. I don't know if it is contraindicated or not, but she had some information on that. Zeolites are another option, but there's a lot of different quality in products, some which I definitely don't recommend. Sourcing is an issue, and some of the products may cause mineral depletion. So if you're using a zeolite, you need to be really careful that you have a highly reputable product. So fucoidan bladderwrack. This is what I came across, and it just sort of bowled me over because it's a super safe binding option, and it was really what I was looking for. And so I'm going to talk a lot more about that in just a second. So one other thing that you can do to address mast cell activation, many people who had extreme vaccine injuries were on 3 different antihistamines at the highest dose to prevent this anaphylactic reaction. And so moving to a low histamine and an anti-inflammatory diet that has low sugar and low refined carbohydrates can definitely be a help. We also need to restore the gut microbiome and the gut epithelial integrity. We need to heal the leaky gut, which is caused by the spike protein, and then could be exacerbated by things like gluten and casein and other things like that. We've got to restore the microbiome with probiotics and prebiotics. One thing I love about fucoidan, which is a component of bladderwrack, is that it feeds the microbiome and restores gut integrity. L-glutamine is an amino acid that also helps to heal leaky gut and restore gut integrity. And once you are not having huge mast cell activation issues, you can incorporate some collagen use because collagen is extremely healing for the gut. But a warning, it is also a high histamine food. So just be careful if that's something that you want to do. If you're just a regular person and you're like, I had soup the other day, I was fine, it's probably not an issue for you. If you're extremely vaccine injured, it might be an issue for you. So things like fucoidan and some other things that are healing to the gut might be used first. So this finding of fucoidan, one of the principal ingredients in bladderwrack, I more or less stumbled upon it. It sort of smacked me in the face. And so I'm going to tell you the story because I feel like having a really good binder is such a central component. And I feel like this is a really optimal binder. And I'm going to share why with you. Okay, so my story was, I'm just going to back up a little bit. and many of you know that Brother Riza Islam is on here. And he asked me to do some work for him to look into his supplement and really validate it with the science, and just as something that helped the brain. And so I did that. But of course, as I've been looking for protocols to help clear spike protein to the body, I was also looking for mechanisms which it might aid in that, such as reducing inflammation, of course, which it does. And at the same time, like, I came across his ingredients of bladderwrack and sea moss, and I didn't really think anything of it. I've been told that those were just sources of minerals. And it was kind of funny because, there were a lot of people that like were really, really great on sea moss. And I was like, what is the deal with sea moss? Why does everybody love sea moss? And I had no idea. And I talked to another chiropractor, and she was telling me some of the things that sea moss did. And I said, that's not just by giving minerals, because you give minerals in a vitamin or many different ways. Something else is going on here. And when she said it, I said, you know what I think that's doing? It's stabilizing the interstitium. It's stabilizing the fluid that's coming out of the intestines into the body, and it's doing positive things to that. And I said, I told her it's not just the minerals, it's doing something else. And so I say that because that was sea moss, but bladderwrack is similar. And when Dr. Robin Rose gave her, she gave a lecture to our Doctors Alliance, she had mentioned that there was this polysaccharide that they were using that was really good. And I asked what it was and if it was a certain thing. And she said, no, it's seaweed. And I said, seaweed, aha, sea moss, bladderwrack. I've been studying those. But I didn't quite catch on, but it clued me in that these polysaccharides, she said, yes, it can be a binder. So I started researching it. And what I come across was fucoidan. And after I'd researched fucoidan and found, I was just gobsmacked at how amazing this molecule is, this sulfated polysaccharide. I went back to her talk and realized it was the exact same molecule she was talking about the whole time. And I just hadn't quite caught on because I wasn't hearing it. And so this is a paper that says sulfated polysaccharides, and this is talking about fucoidan, one of the key ingredients in bladderwrack, effectively inhibit SARS-CoV-2 in vitro. One of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is because it was published in Cell Discovery, one of the, in Nature, basically one of the world's most important journals, in July of 2020. So in July of 2020, basically, scientists told us that the active ingredients in bladderwrack, which is seaweed, was one of the most effective binders for SARS-CoV-2 and could be used to reduce infection, to prevent basically the inflammatory reaction that was caused in the gut in some children, and all kinds of other problems. And they published this in July 2020, and we never heard about it. So this sulfated polysaccharide they're talking about, again, is fucoidan, one of the key ingredients in bladderwrack. And here is basically the lower the bar, the higher its affinity for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which it binds and doesn't let go of, including the spike protein. And so what they're finding is, and this red one here, is fucoidan binds the spike protein and the SARS-CoV-2 virus optimally, much better than anything else that they tried. So it is a very, very effective binder of the virus and of the spike protein. Had we known that, and I'll just add here that there are many products out there. There's some nasal sprays that have like iodine and things in them, and they also have carrageenan, which is very similar. It's also a sulfated polysaccharide that can also bind the virus. And so when you spray that in your nose, and then if you're going to the airport or whatever, it can prevent any virus that you can come across from causing an infection and getting you ill. So utilizing these effectively, whether it's in this pandemic or the next one, could be really key, and especially to bind the virus or the spike protein in the gut and or in the interstitium. All right, so as I was studying fucoidan, bladderwrack is brown seaweed, and fucoidan has the highest natural source of fucoidan. It's about 20 to about 35%. When I started studying this molecule, fucoidan, I was blown away. because it has so many positive benefits. It binds viruses, all sorts of envelope viruses. So this is a good thing for anything. Like if the kids are bringing home some norovirus that's making them puke, well, this is probably going to help bind it, right? It feeds and restores the microbiome. It's a polysaccharide that optimally feeds the gut and helps them make optimal signaling molecules. So it's going to restore the gut microbiome and restore gut signaling. It restores gut epithelial integrity. It reverses leaky gut, is acutely anti-inflammatory, and it shuts down allergic responses, including mast cell activation. All of this while actually increasing natural beneficial immune responses in which T cells are attacking tumors and destroying tumors. And it also reduces autoimmune type responses. So everything that we're looking for, this binder not only binds the virus and the spike protein, it does all of these things that we need in restoring function from what damage the virus and the spike protein have done. So I was blown away. I love the idea of being able to use it in the full context of the natural sources, because bladderwrack has a lot of polyphenols that are extremely anti-inflammatory and have a lot of other positive benefits. I will issue one caution. If you're going to use bladderwrack or CMOS, the polysaccharide is carrageenan. In the context of whole CMOS, it seems to be extremely beneficial. When they've taken carrageenan out of the CMOS for like commercial purposes to use it as a thickener in foods, it can be extremely inflammatory for some people. But when it's in the context of CMOS, it seems to be, every case that I've seen, it has been just beneficial. I would say that if you're using bladderwrack or CMOS, you do want to make sure that you're not using really high doses or using it, really high doses all the time, because if you use really high doses, it can impact your hormonal balance. Now, in some people, it might be a positive thing, but that's something to work with your practitioner. So you don't want to use huge amounts of it every day. And this is just one of those things where you're going, if a little is good, a ton is better. And that's not always the case. So, and you can also buy just fucoidan. I'm not saying I have a great source for that, but you can buy fucoidan if you just go on Amazon and, good luck or whatever, you can find what you need. All right. But hopefully we'll get some practitioners who have some solid sources of fucoidan that they feel are really reputable. So one thing that I think fucoidan is also doing, what fucoidan does, it's a sulfated polysaccharide, and it's probably actually coming up and binding to the mucosa of your gut. So this would be the inside of the gut, and it's binding to it. And what it's doing is it's preventing the entrance of virus and spike protein into the interstitium and into the blood. So it's binding it before it can get to the rest of your body. It's also probably binding a whole lot of other garbage, including aberrant and cancer cells, and preventing them from going through. And so I think that the healing effects of some of these seaweeds are from doing this. They're actually acting as a hydrating guard for the fluid systems of the body to prevent stuff that shouldn't be going into our body, from our gut into our body, from our gut into our interstitium or into our blood. And so they're really providing a protective role, and that's why they have such huge positive effect on the body. At the same time, they are nourishing this interstitium and the blood with key minerals, because they're very, very high in minerals. And they bring in the minerals because they have a negative charge, and most minerals, such as calcium and magnesium, are positively charged. So they bring a lot of minerals into the system with them. They're also structuring the gel of the interstitium. This is probably a lifetime work of me figuring out how this is a really positive thing, but there's a lot of information sort of pointing to the fact that these sulfated polysaccharides, in reestablishing the proper context and hydration and structuring of water, that this has amazing health benefits. So that's another reason why I was so excited about fucoidan. And I believe that as it binds up to your mucosa, there's probably little seahorses in there with little harps playing some heavenly music, because it's such a great thing. Okay. So one of the reasons why I am so excited about fucoidan is because it's utilized quite a bit, actually. It's very safe, it's very healing for the gut, and it's a potential spike binder that's a no-brainer for children. In fact, I'm a consultant for a company called LifeVantage, and we have a great prebiotic, and it has fucoidan in it. And this is a drink mix where you can just take and mix it up. It's just a little like fruity drink mix for kids. And it has fucoidan and L-glutamine, where the fucoidan can act as a binder for spike protein while nourishing the gut. It also, L-glutamine is a key food for intestinal cells, which also helps restore gut integrity. And it also has other gut healthy polysaccharides, which are going to help restore bowel function and to restore the gut. And so I love that there is an option for children that's really safe. All right. Again, when I went back after I figured out all these amazing properties of fucoidan, I went back to check out Robin Rose's seminar and found out that her key sequestration method, it's called sequesterol, actually the key ingredient was fucoidan, which she was telling us, but she was going through it so quickly that I wasn't catching on and I didn't know all of its amazing health benefits. She also has a zeolite and some silica in there as well. So one of the reasons that I love bladderwrack, which is a huge source of fucoidan, is it's 20% to 35% fucoidan. It has all of its natural antioxidants, flavonoids, nutrients, and minerals in context. So it's a full food. And so you don't have the problems you have when you're sort of isolating things. It's high in minerals, but specifically potassium and magnesium, which support the adrenal glands. And I said that's a really key component of a spike detox program. And it also is reducing, the fucoidan itself works to reduce inflammation. As I said before, many binders such as activated charcoal and zeolites can deplete the body of minerals. So it's also high in iodine, which nourishes the thyroid gland, and many people have thyroid issues partly due to leaky gut and some other issues there. And it supports the microbiome by restoring normal gut signaling as well. So I just told you the story before about how I came across all of this because Brother Riza Islam had asked me to actually, really look at the science of his products. And so as I was looking at them, first of all, I was like, wow, 13, I've got to find science on 13 of these. And then I was like, gully root, fitweed, vervain, sensitiva, bladderwrack. I was like, is this a Harry Potter movie? I'm supposed to figure out what these do. Do I get access to the library from, Professor Snape's library or from Gryffindor's library to figure out what these do? And then, but in reality, if we're talking about the dark arts, these herbs are it when we're talking about protection from the dark arts, because these different herbs are really, really powerful. And so it was in the context of looking this up, and in full disclosure, Brother Riza never actually asked me to look and see what this did as a spike detox. I just couldn't stop myself. And so when I started finding these things, I, kept looking a little bit more and a little bit more. And so one of the reasons people are getting great results with this particular supplement, and one of the reasons why I think is it's really, really fresh. And so in just a second, I'm going to have Brother Riza hop on to talk about that. But I want to take a second before I do for me to share all the reasons I was impressed with this product as a potential spike detox. I was not expecting to find this at all, but I couldn't stop myself from looking. And after I found out about bladderwrack, I sort of was looking at some other things as well. So as I said before, this has bladderwrack, which has the sulfated polysaccharide fucoidan, as well as another sulfated polysaccharide called carrageenan, which is in sea moss. So it's going to bind the spike in the gut and restore gut integrity at moderate amounts. It's not in a high enough amount that's going to affect all of your hormones and things like that. So this product also has many, many different herbs in it that reduce inflammation, such as turmeric, rosemary, basil, oregano, and patchouli. All of these are strongly activating the body's natural antioxidant detox pathways that reduce inflammation. It also has many herbs that have a lot of really strong anti-cancer properties, such as turmeric, soursop, bladderwrack, and gully root. It also, as I said, has minerals through sea moss and bladderwrack that are providing adrenal support, which is a key aspect of any spike detox protocol, and soursop, which has vitamin C, which also will nourish the adrenals. And it also has key polyphenols that do really important things. So Robin Rose identified 9 polyphenols that were critical in her spike detox protocol. I'm going to go more into that in just a second after Brother Riza speaks. But these polyphenols were found to do really important things: break up those syncytia, those zombie cells, prevent, and when those cells are broken up and they release all of their spike protein everywhere, these different polyphenols were found to prevent them from going into other cells and causing new zombie cells. They also induced autophagy, killing those zombie cells, and they're mast cell stabilizers. So they prevented the allergic reaction to the spike protein once it was released. So there are 9 that she came across, but this particular supplement, Intellectual Power, different elements of it have several of them, including curcumin, quercetin, luteolin, rutin, ECGC, which is green tea extract, and fisetin. So this really, for me, is kind of a no-brainer for people who are like, well, I'm not extremely vaccine injured. I just want to make sure I'm doing something to address this because I see that it's real. Or maybe I have some minor or moderate problems. So the more your problems, the more you're going to want to not just use this, you're going to want to take another step and another step. But for many people, this is going to address a lot of these different issues, at least theoretically, so we can see what it does in real life. So at this point, I'm going to stop my screen share for a second and bring on Brother Riza and have him talk about his product for just a couple of minutes so that you can know a little bit more about it.
Peace. Well, Dr. Christina, I have to let you know first off, thank you so much for doing this wonderful presentation, going over the data, dealing with what we are dealing with after this 3 to 4 year experiment of some sorts, and that situation to where now people are realizing health and we're now looking at solutions to rectify the condition. So I just appreciate you for taking out your time to get the research nailed down. With regards to potentially rectifying or helping and aiding with overall health with a strong focus on the nervous system, immune system, the gut microbiome, etc. Intellectual Power, we were able to put this together as a result of what was taking place. And I primarily looked at the ingredients myself. I had to look at things that would help with the reproductive system, immune system, nervous system, and with detoxification, ways to help to push all of these things out of the body. And so I went to the island of St. Lucia. I met with someone by the name of Priest Kailash, who has a strong emphasis in training in herbalism, of course, in medical practicing, or his area of service when it comes to that. Going to medical school, he's also fluent in about 4 different languages in the middle of his studies. And I met with him and the Rastafari on that island, and they were telling me the different things, specific herbs that aid in these areas that I told him I needed help in. I sent him a list of 29 things that were as a result of the overall negative health circumstance that people are dealing with, and with a strong emphasis on SARS-CoV-2, specifically as a result of the shots and the data we received from Pfizer and all of that. So I said, I need to come up with something that's going to help, at least help, when it comes to people's overall health. And so this is what we came up with. And some of those ingredients, as Dr. Christina pointed out beautifully, tackle different areas. But we had to look at something specifically that aided with the brain, nervous system, reproductive system, and again, detoxification. And I think we pretty much nailed it. Everything is 100% vegan. I'm not a vegan, but I understand the significance. in that when it comes to supplementation. So everything, including the capsules, are vegetable fiber. This is non-GMO. We source it from an area on an island that has no major factories around this island. It's literally on the side of a mountain. It is totally away from the rest of society. The herbs are grown from the rainwater. Everything is extremely potent. So the turmeric you see is extremely potent over there versus the turmeric here. Nothing has the heavy metals. Nothing has any of the chemicals you would see when it comes to what we eat here or take advantage of here in America. So it's very, very, very nutritious, potent, and it has none of the nonsense, when it comes to being out here. And we also encased it in black glass to prevent oxidation during transportation. It's another thing as well. So just wanted to make sure that we had something as a solution, because we know the problem. We have lots of problems, but we have to focus on solutions. And so just in my few seconds, I'm glad that Dr. Christina gave me this time to do a quick presentation on that. Anyone who wants to do any more research on it, please go to intellectualpower.net. We have the science, which is thanks to Dr. Christina Parks, who did her part to delve into that. There's a full page on that and everything else. We have videos describing everything. And of course, the results page for people's personal testimonials. I think we have reached almost 250 testimonials already. Beautiful results and lots of things people are saying of how it's helping them. So thank you again, Dr. Sina, and I'll get back over to you.
Thank you. So one of the things that I, again, really love about that product is how fresh it is. Like, we've all gotten supplements and who knows how long they've been sitting on the shelves, because I know Brother Riza and I've actually gotten the supplement. I know that it's so fresh. You can smell all of the ingredients, and these polyphenols that are so active, those are going to be more active because they're more fresh. And so I think that that is a critical aspect of it. And they're very powerful in preventing the spike protein from getting into other cells. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's one of the things I really love. And I love that it's a whole food product, because I think that herbs are extremely adaptogenic. So these are all the whole herbs, and there is definitely a place for the different specific ingredients. And, I will bring that information to you as well. But for people who do want to use a whole herb, I think that this is a great option. Okay, so I'm going to continue with my presentation. Here we go. Okay. All right, so we're almost at the end, so hang on there with me, guys. If you have to hop off, eventually you will get the recording and this will be uploaded to the website. But so as we go through, and these things toward the end here, especially Robin Rose addresses this in a lot more detail. And so I wanted to set up sort of this structure for that, but there will be a lot more detail. And there are obviously other elements of a detox protocol that I'm not able to touch on here, just in the interest of time, but those will be covered, but not all in one seminar. So the next step is, of course, addressing inflammation. So we've prevented, we've prevented the spike protein and the virus from getting into the blood, getting into other cells. But we also want to address inflammation, because if we do induce autophagy and these aberrant cells blow up and release their spike protein, it's going to cause inflammation. And the spike protein is coming, there's probably some low level of autophagy all the time. So this is causing extreme inflammation, to the point where practitioners are telling us that the baseline for inflammation for everybody is high. Whether you think you're ill or not, everyone is inflamed because of their interactions with the spike protein. So reducing inflammation is key. One of the most potent, effective methods of reducing inflammation to me is an NRF2 activator by LifeVantage. This is a patent blend of turmeric, milk thistle, ashwagandha, bacopa, and green tea extract, clinically shown to reduce inflammation 40% in 30 days. In full disclosure, I'm a consultant for this, but if most of you know me, whatever is the best thing, I'm going to tell you. And there's a reason why I think that this is a really critical thing that can be used optimally in a spike detox protocol. And that is because it contains some of these polyphenols that are preventing the spike protein from getting into other cells. So if you look down here, there are other different ways to do this. You could use molecular hydrogen, which I don't really know all that much about, but it's promoted by Dr. Mercola. It's also an NRF2 activator. Intermittent fasting can be helpful, and I'm a fan of fasting. Ozone and hyperbaric also reduce inflammation by activating the NRF2 pathway. All of these can be helpful, but they don't have these polyphenols that can prevent liberated spike protein from going into other cells. And that is really, really critical. Obviously, in conjunction with activating the body's own antioxidant detox system that reduces inflammation, we want to provide the body with vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, which are just critical to the body's anti-inflammatory response and to a healthy immune system. If you are extremely highly inflamed or you're looking for different options, other things that are very, very good at reducing inflammation are ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, black seed oil, and low-dose naltrexone. So if you're working with a practitioner, those may be other options that you want to consider using together or in conjunction, just depending on your particular case. The other thing that we absolutely have to address is that mitochondrial dysfunction that's keeping energy production really low and not telling aberrant cells to kill themselves like they should be. So one of the very few products that I've seen that actually addresses mitochondrial dysfunction at the root level by actually addressing it at the genetic level is the LifeVantage NRF1 activator. And so this actually activates the body to make new mitochondria by activating gene expression. It contains a synergistic blend of acetyl L-carnitine, quercetin, grape extract, which is resveratrol, and alpha-lipoic acid, which turns on signaling that supports mitochondrial function and initiates mitochondrial repair in mitogenesis. And biogenesis. So notice that I have quercetin and resveratrol also highlighted because those are key in the spike detox protocol, because quercetin is really, really key in preventing that spike from going into other cells once it's liberated. And both quercetin and resveratrol actually induce autophagy. They tell the cells to commit suicide. And resveratrol is one of the stronger inducers of autophagy. And so it's a really critical part of a spike detox protocol. I do want to say here that an NRF1 activator, which activates mitochondria, should never be taken without something that activates the NRF2 system and reduces inflammation. Because when you gear up the mitochondria to make energy, just think about a power plant. If you have a power plant running, it produces pollution. The same with your mitochondria. When you activate them, they produce free radicals in the form of like electrons, and those actually damage tissues. The NRF2 pathway makes antioxidants such as glutathione, such as superoxide dismutase, such as catalase that mop up free radicals. So you absolutely need to activate the NRF2 pathway, reduce inflammation, reduce inflammation, reduce inflammation before you start like souping up your mitochondria to make more energy. And of course, when you repair the mitochondria, then the signaling that tells the cells to kill themselves when it's appropriate is going to come online as well and work more effectively. Okay, so two of the most important steps that have really been hurdles for people in generating a spike detox protocol has been inducing autophagy in those aggregated cells containing the spike protein, and then preventing the liberated spike protein, if they're able to induce autophagy, from entering other cells. And that can obviously cause mast cell activation or just generalized inflammation. And so I want to talk about those specifically. All right. Dr. Robin Rose, who again is just a world leader in helping us understand how to clear spike protein from the body. And she has another webinar where she gets really, really deep into this, has shown that there are key polyphenols that induce autophagy. So they tell the cells to kill themselves and break up syncytia. They block spike protein from entering other cells once it's liberated, and most of them are mast cell stabilizers. So she has a protocol called Medicinals 9, which has 9 of these key molecules. And ones that she has that induce autophagy and break up syncytia are fisetin, resveratrol, and quercetin, and to a lesser extent, rutin, curcumin, ECGC, luteolin, and bicalin. And then ones that block the spike protein, these are her 9, the Medicinals 9, from entering other cells are bicalin, quercetin, luteolin, rutin, hesperidin, curcumin, ECGC, which is green tea extract, piperine, and I'm not sure how you say that, it's licorice. Okay. So when you see these in red, there were a few of these. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 of them that did everything. Like they were mast cell active. I mean, there were all of these different parameters that they measured that were helpful to restoring health and preventing damage from the spike protein. And there were many, 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 like her list was probably on the, maybe like 50 to 60 different things that they were looking for these polyphenols to do. And some of them did almost every single thing. So they were beneficial in just about every way through every pathway. And those are the ones that I've listed in red here. Quercetin, rutin, which breaks down to become quercetin, curcumin, green tea extract, luteolin, and bicalin. And so these are really, really key. And the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because, oops, let me go back. If we look at the LifeVantage products, which again, they're reducing inflammation and restoring our mitochondrial function, but they also have these critical polyphenols that are, one, inducing autophagy. So a key ingredient in the NRF1 activator is resveratrol that is absolutely key in inducing autophagy, but it's also supported by other inducers of autophagy, which are green tea extract, curcumin, and quercetin. And then it also has these same polyphenols that block the spike protein from entering other cells once it's liberated. And that is green tea extract, curcumin, and quercetin. And those are key ingredients that just sort of do all of these positive things. Remember, those were highlighted in red. So very, very important supports. Then if you look at the intellectual power, which again is these herbs, and this is where we get our polyphenols from, these herbs. It has these key polyphenols that induce autophagy. Fisetin was one of the most critical ones that was used in the Medicinal 9 protocol, and that is found in sensitiva. It also has green tea extract, which is in soursop, curcumin, which is in turmeric, obviously, and quercetin, which is found in oregano, basil, and soursop. So it has key ingredients to induce autophagy, but it also has these very important polyphenols that are going to block the spike protein from going into other cells, such as green tea extract, which is in soursop, curcumin, which is in turmeric, quercetin, which is in oregano, basil, and soursop, luteolin, which is in rosemary, oregano, basil, and sensitiva, and rutin, which is in basil, sensitiva, and soursop. And it also has the binder fucoidan, which is going to bind it in the gut and probably in the interstitium. And you're probably, after you've been taking it a while, your body probably metabolizes it. So it probably is somewhat available in the body to bind the spike protein when you're taking it. And again, fucoidan is the molecule that Robin Rose also is using in her Medicinals 9. So I really love the idea of using both of these products to basically reduce inflammation, restore the mitochondria, induce autophagy, and block the spike protein from going into other cells. And this, again, is really for the average person that just wants to be very proactive about their health and dealing with this so that, you know, the spike protein isn't causing damage to their intestines or putting, these different zombie cells in their brain. And for the people that are just sort of mildly to moderately have some issues, right? If you are extremely affected, you either have very acute post-COVID syndrome or a very acute vaccine injury, then you probably need a stronger approach, and that is her Medicinals 9 protocol, which is administered by a practitioner under supervision, so that when you liberate that spike protein, she has it every step of the way what needs to happen. But for the average person or people who are just having these minor problems of brain fog or whatever it is, I really like how these products can synergize to do all of the different components of the protocol. And so, yeah, if Brother Riza, if you're in there, if you could drop that link to the LifeVantage protocol in the chat for those who might be interested. And of course, I'll get that downloaded to the website as well. And again, as I see other options, that's what I want to bring you. So I just do want to mention here that there are some supplements that have been, sort of shown to be very widely used and helpful to those who are vaccine injured or have post-COVID syndrome. And again, we talked about ivermectin, which prevents spike protein binding, is antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and neuromodulatory. Just remember, if you're using it with these polyphenols that have a lot of quercetin, you don't want to take those at the same time of day because they affect the way each one of them works. Also, Nigella sativa, black cumin seed, is an antihistamine, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, immunomodulatory, and good for neurological issues. So many people have used that. And to reduce inflammation and to moderate neurological issues under a practitioner care, many people have been prescribed low-dose naltrexone. So those may be options that you can talk to your practitioner about. But the take home really for this is that you need to get your binders on board. Make sure that you have gut binders such as fucoidan bladderwrack, humic acid, and or others before you use antibiotics to kill your gut bacteria, which will release the spike protein, or you strongly induce autophagy by one mechanism or another, which releases the spike protein. And make sure you have systemic spike blockers, such as those 9, the bacalin and the quercetin, the luteolin, the rutin, the hesperidin, the curcumin, ECGC, and the rest. Some of those need to be there, and it needs to be in your system so that as you liberate the spike protein, it doesn't go into other cells and create these zombie cells again, which are just spewing inflammatory cytokines that keep your brain and every other tissue on fire, right? Okay, and so as I said before, if you have a really high spike load, you're going to have a high amount of these zombie cells, and they resist killing themselves. They resist autophagy. So you're going to have to use high-dose senolytics such as resveratrol and fisetin. And so that's when you need to be under the care, for sure, of a practitioner. And I'm not giving any sort of medical advice. So I'm just sort of giving you what I see theoretically that elements of a spike detox protocol should have. And I think, okay. And so why certain treatments have only provided some relief to those either with post-COVID syndrome or vaccine injury. And that's because, like for ivermectin, while ivermectin is great at preventing further infection, reducing inflammation and other things, it's not inducing autophagy in these zombie cells. So it's not getting rid of the spike-filled zombie cells, which are spewing out inflammatory cytokines. And so it is sort of just, like someone that's bailing water out of a ship. If you don't, do something about the hole, then you're going to keep bailing. Things like ozone and hyperbaric can be really, really great for reducing inflammation, activating the NRF2 pathway. But again, if you don't address those zombie cells, then you're not going to reduce, they're still going to be spewing the inflammatory cytokines. So you're going to have to keep reducing inflammation. And if they do induce autophagy, that spike can be released and flood the system, resulting in worse symptoms. So fasting also induces autophagy. If you're just doing moderate fasting and you're not really ill, your body can probably modulate that and do just fine. However, the use of gut binders and some of these other polyphenols, such as quercetin, can probably be really helpful in helping to make sure that if spike is liberated, that it's not going to get into your cells and just create more zombie cells and create inflammation in the process. Okay, and so again, as I've said, if you have high spike protein burden from vaccine injury or post-COVID syndrome, Dr. Robin Rose's Medicinals 9 protocol is a practitioner-assisted protocol that strongly induces autophagy and increases the dosages of these systemic binders like the quercetin, the ones that are all listed right here. And so she has a video where she talks about that. And so you can look at that video and you can access her practice. And also, if you're a practitioner and are interested in actually, becoming using the medicinal 9 for your patients, then you can contact her to become, I don't know what you would call it, a partner in using the Medicinals 9 protocol. So we'll have information on the website for you to do that. All right, thank you, and I can take questions now.